The grandfather clock in King Alexander's private study chimed 6 times, its deep resonance echoing through the ornate chamber as morning light filtered through heavy velvet curtains. Alexander sat motionless behind his desk, the weight of the crown seeming heavier than ever before. The photographs before him told a story he had refused to see for months. His wife, Queen Isabel, locked in passionate embraces with Prince Marcus, his younger brother and closest advisor. Alexander's hands trembled slightly as he picked up one of the images. It had been taken just 3 days ago at the Autumn Charity Gala, in what they thought was a secluded garden pavilion. The couple appeared lost in each other, completely unaware of the telephoto lens capturing their forbidden affair. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same gala where he had publicly praised Isabel for her dedication to the crown and her unwavering support of the monarchy. The door to his study creaked open, and Lady Catherine Ashford entered with his morning tea. She moved with the grace that had caught his attention years ago when she first joined the royal household as his personal secretary. Catherine had been a constant presence in his life for the past 8 years, managing his schedule, his correspondence, and somehow always knowing exactly what he needed before he asked. "Your Majesty," Catherine said softly, setting the silver tray on the side table. Her voice carried the refined accent of her Oxford education, but there was warmth there that had always comforted him. "Lord Chancellor Pemberton is waiting in the Blue Room for your morning briefing." Alexander looked up at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Catherine was 34, with auburn hair always pulled back in an elegant chignon, and intelligent green eyes that seemed to see everything but judge nothing. She wore a simple navy dress that somehow managed to be both professional and flattering. There was something about her presence that had always calmed him, even during the most stressful periods of his reign. "Catherine," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "How long have you known?" She paused, her hand still on the tea tray, and he saw something flicker in her eyes, pain, perhaps, or resignation. "Known what, Your Majesty?" Alexander gestured to the photographs spread across his desk. Catherine's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't seem shocked. Instead, her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, as if she'd been carrying this burden for far too long. "I suspected for about 6 months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The secret meetings, the changed schedules, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. I didn't know how to tell you." The admission hung between them, like a confession in a cathedral. Alexander stood and walked to the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens, where autumn had painted the trees in brilliant oranges and reds. In the distance, he could see the rose garden where he had proposed to Isabel 15 years ago, when he was still Prince Alexander, and the weight of the crown was just a distant possibility. "You've been protecting me," he said, not turning around. "All this time, you've been trying to shield me from this." Catherine moved closer, her footsteps soft on the Persian carpet. "It wasn't my place to interfere in your personal life, Your Majesty. I'm just your secretary." Alexander turned then, and their eyes met across the room. "Are you just my secretary?" The question carried more weight than either of them had been prepared to acknowledge. Catherine's cheeks flushed slightly, but she held his gaze. For 8 years, they had worked together almost every day. She had been there through political crises, family scandals, and the loneliest moments of his reign. She knew his favorite tea, his preferred walking routes through the gardens, the way he rubbed his temples when he was stressed. She knew him better than anyone, perhaps even better than he knew himself. "I care about you," Catherine said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Not as a king, but as a person. I've watched you sacrifice your happiness for duty time and time again. You deserve better than this betrayal." Alexander felt something shift inside his chest, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. For years, he had buried his feelings under layers of royal protocol and duty. He had married Isabel because it was expected, because it strengthened political alliances and pleased the people. But he had never felt the deep, abiding connection that he now realized had been growing between him and Catherine all along. "I've been such a fool," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, which was beginning to show distinguished streaks of silver at the temples. "I've been living in a marriage that was nothing more than a performance, while the one person who truly understood me was right here." Catherine stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her subtle lavender perfume. "Alexander," she said, using his given name for the first time in years. "What are you going to do?" The use of his name, without his title, felt like a small revolution between them. Alexander reached out and gently touched her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin and the slight tremor that betrayed her composure. "I'm going to do something that hasn't been done in the history of this monarchy," he said, his decision crystallizing with each word. "I'm going to choose love over duty. I'm going to choose happiness over obligation. And I'm going to choose you." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't pull away. "The scandal will be enormous. The press, the parliament, the people, they'll never accept it. Then we'll change their minds," Alexander said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I've spent 15 years as king, trying to be the monarch I thought the people wanted. Maybe it's time to show them who I really am." Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Valdoria, but inside the study, something new was beginning. Alexander picked up the photographs of his wife's betrayal and walked to the fireplace. One by one, he fed them to the flames, watching as the evidence of Isabel's infidelity turned to ash. "There's no going back from this," Catherine warned, but her hand remained in his. "Good," Alexander said, turning to face her fully. "I've been going backward for too long. It's time to move forward with you by my side." The morning briefing with Lord Chancellor Pemberton would have to wait. Alexander had a marriage to end, a kingdom to reshape, and a love story to begin. The clock chimed the half-hour, marking the moment when King Alexander Edmund Whitmore III decided to rewrite not just his own destiny, but the very definition of what it meant to rule with both power and heart. As they stood together by the fireplace, watching the last of the photographs curl into nothing, Catherine smiled. The first genuine smile Alexander had seen in the palace in longer than he could remember. It was then, he knew, with absolute certainty, that he was making the right choice. The revolution had begun, not with armies or declarations, but with a simple recognition that even kings deserved to love and be loved in return. The hardest battles lay ahead, but for the first time in years, Alexander felt ready to fight them, not alone, but with Catherine at his side. Part 2. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Queen Isabel's private sitting room as she arranged white roses in a crystal vase, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. She hummed softly to herself, the melody of a French lullaby her mother used to sing, while planning the evening state dinner for the visiting ambassador from Belgrade. Isabel had always prided herself on being the perfect queen, elegant, poised, and utterly dedicated to her royal duties. At 38, Queen Isabel Montclair Whitmore remained strikingly beautiful, with platinum blonde hair that caught the light and sapphire blue eyes that had charmed diplomats and commoners alike. She wore a cream silk blouse with pearl buttons and a navy pencil skirt that emphasized her still slender figure. Her engagement ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds, caught the gray morning light as she worked. A soft knock interrupted her peaceful morning routine. "Come in," she called, expecting her lady-in-waiting with a morning correspondence. Instead, King Alexander entered, his expression grave and unreadable. Something in his bearing immediately set off alarm bells in Isabel's mind. In their 12 years of marriage, she had learned to read his moods like weather patterns, and this felt like an approaching storm. "Alexander," she said, setting down the roses and smoothing her skirt. "You look troubled. Is everything all right with the Belgrade negotiations?" He closed the door behind him with deliberate care, the soft click seeming to echo in the suddenly tense room. "We need to talk, Isabel. About us. About Marcus. About the lies that have been poisoning this palace." Isabel's face went pale, the color draining so quickly that for a moment Alexander almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She sank into one of her delicate Louis XVI chairs, her hands gripping the armrests. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Alexander, if someone has been spreading rumors, sit down," he said quietly, though she was already seated. The command in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't her husband speaking. This was her king. "I know about the affair, Isabel. I've known for days now. The only question is how long you're going to continue lying to my face." Isabel's composure cracked like fine porcelain. Tears welled in her eyes, but Alexander found himself unmoved by them. How many times had she cried these same tears over imaginary slights and manufactured dramas? How many times had he comforted her, believing her to be the victim of palace gossip or media speculation? "How long?" he asked, moving to stand by the window that overlooked the same garden where Catherine had walked with such purpose that morning. "Alexander, please, let me explain. How long?" he repeated, his voice cutting through her attempted deflection like a blade. Isabel's shoulders shook as she finally surrendered to the truth. 8 months, she whispered. "It started 8 months ago at the Easter celebrations. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. 8 months. Alexander absorbed this information like a physical blow. 8 months of deception, of elaborate lies, of playing the happy royal couple for the cameras while his wife was in love with his brother. 8 months of state dinners and public appearances and private moments that had all been nothing but performance. "Do you love him?" Alexander asked, surprised by how calm his own voice sounded. Isabel looked up at him then, and for the first time in their conversation, he saw something honest in her eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I love him more than I've ever loved anyone. More than I loved you, even in the beginning." The admission should have hurt more than it did. Instead, Alexander felt something like relief settling over him. At least now, they were dealing in truth rather than pretense. "And he loves you?" "Yes." Isabel's voice was stronger now, as if acknowledging her feelings had given her courage. "We've been trying to find a way to tell you, but every time we started, we thought about the scandal, the damage to the monarchy, the constitutional crisis it would cause." Alexander turned from the window to study his wife's face. Even tear-stained and guilty, she was beautiful. But he realized now that her beauty had always been like that of a painting in a museum, something to be admired from a distance, but never truly possessed or understood. "Constitutional crisis," he repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what you call it when a queen falls in love with her brother-in-law? I call it a blessing in disguise." Isabel blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" Alexander moved to his wife's desk and picked up a sheet of her personal stationery. Her monogram, crowned with the royal seal, seemed to mock him from the top of the page. "I mean that your betrayal has given me something I never thought I could have. Freedom." "Alexander, I don't understand. For 12 years, Isabel, we've been playing roles. The devoted king and queen, the perfect royal couple, the fairy tale marriage that the people wanted to believe in. But we've never really been married, have we? We've been two actors sharing a stage, reading from a script written by tradition and expectation." Isabel stood slowly, her hand reaching toward him. "That's not true. We had good times. We had pleasant times," Alexander corrected gently. "We had companionable times. We had times when we enjoyed each other's company. But can you honestly tell me that you've ever felt truly known by me? Truly seen? Truly loved for who you are rather than what you represent?" The question hung in the air between them. Isabel's hand dropped to her side as the truth of his words settled over her. They had been fond of each other, certainly. They had shared moments of genuine affection and mutual respect. But love, the deep, transformative, soul-connecting love that made people risk everything, that had never existed between them. "I wanted to be a good wife to you," Isabel said quietly. "I tried so hard to be the queen you needed. And I tried to be the husband you deserved," Alexander replied. "But we were both trying to be people we're not. You were never meant to be satisfied with quiet dinners and duty. You're passionate, dramatic, romantic. You need grand gestures and epic love stories. And He paused, thinking of Catherine's gentle smile and understanding eyes. "I need something quieter. Something real." Isabel wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "What happens now? Do you exile us? Have Marcus stripped of his titles? Throw me in the Tower of London like Henry VIII? Despite everything, Alexander almost smiled. Even in crisis, Isabel had a flair for the dramatic. "This isn't the 16th century, Isabel. And I'm not Henry VIII. He moved to her writing desk and began composing something by hand, his pen scratching across the expensive paper. "I'm going to give you something that no queen in the history of Eldoria has ever received, a chance to choose love over duty." Isabel approached slowly, reading over his shoulder as he wrote. "A joint statement announcing our mutual decision to dissolve our marriage," she read aloud. "By mutual consent, after careful consideration, their majesties have decided to end their marriage to pursue paths better suited to their individual happiness and the stability of the realm." You're letting me go?" she asked, wonder creeping in her voice. "I'm setting us both free," Alexander said, continuing to write. "Marcus will renounce his claim to the throne, of course. He'll lose his royal titles, but retain his personal wealth and estates. You'll keep your settlement and properties in France. And, in time, when the shock wears off, you can marry the man you actually love." Isabel sank into the chair beside him, watching as he outlined their future with the same methodical precision he brought to all his royal duties. "The scandal will be enormous. The press will crucify us all. Let them," Alexander said, signing his name with a flourish. "The British monarchy survived Edward VIII's abdication. We'll survive this too. And maybe we'll come out stronger, more honest, more human." "Is there someone else?" Isabel asked suddenly, her intuition picking up on something in his manner. "For you, I mean." Alexander paused in his writing and looked at his wife, soon to be his ex-wife, with genuine affection for the first time in months. "There might be," he said honestly. "Someone who's been here all along, someone I should have noticed years ago." Isabel's eyes lit up with curiosity despite her tears. "Lady Catherine?" Alexander's surprise must have shown on his face because Isabel actually laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from her in longer than he could remember. "Alexander, she's been in love with you for years. Everyone in the palace knows it except you. The way she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching, the way she anticipates your needs, the way she's never shown the slightest interest in any of the men who've courted her, because she was waiting for something that seemed impossible." "And now?" Alexander asked. "Now," Isabel said, reaching over to squeeze his hand in a gesture of genuine warmth. "Maybe it's not impossible anymore." As the rain continued to fall outside, King Alexander and Queen Isabel sat together in her sitting room, planning the end of their marriage with more honesty and cooperation than they had shown in all their years together. It was, Alexander reflected, the most intimate conversation they had ever had. The white roses Isabel had been arranging lay forgotten on the side table, their petals beginning to drop onto the polished wood surface. Like their marriage, they had been beautiful, but ultimately fragile, lacking the deep roots needed to weather real storms. But storms, Alexander was learning, sometimes cleared the air for something better to grow. Part 3, the emergency meeting of the Privy Council convened at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the oak-paneled chamber that had witnessed centuries of royal crises. Lord Chancellor Pemberton, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his weathered hands folded over a stack of legal documents that would reshape the monarchy forever. Around the table sat the most powerful figures in the realm. Archbishop Theodore Hastings, whose moral authority could make or break a king's decision. General Sir William Crawford, the military's representative whose loyalty could determine the monarchy's survival. Prime Minister Victoria Sterling, a sharp-minded woman whose political acumen had kept the government stable through 3 different administrations. And Lady Margaret Thornfield, the Queen Mother's chief advisor and the unofficial keeper of royal protocol. King Alexander entered the chamber with Catherine at his side, a decision that immediately sent ripples of shock through the assembled council members. Catherine carried a leather portfolio containing the legal documents they had spent the morning preparing, her professional demeanor intact despite the magnitude of what they were about to announce. "Your Majesty," Lord Pemberton began, rising with the others as protocol demanded. "We understand you have a matter of utmost urgency to discuss with the Council." Alexander remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture Catherine recognized as his way of maintaining composure under pressure. He wore his formal day uniform, the navy jacket adorned with medals and ribbons that told the story of his service to the crown. But today, those symbols of duty felt more like armor against the storm he was about to unleash. "Members of the Council," Alexander began, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years on the throne. "I have called you here to inform you of a decision that will test our institution's ability to evolve with the times, while maintaining its essential dignity and purpose." Archbishop Hastings shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his robes rustling like autumn leaves. "Your Majesty, if this concerns the rumors about Queen Isabel—" "It concerns the truth about my marriage," Alexander interrupted smoothly. "Queen Isabel and I have reached a mutual decision to dissolve our union. This morning, she confessed to an affair with Prince Marcus that has been ongoing for 8 months. Rather than allow this deception to continue poisoning our family and our institution, we have chosen to address it with complete honesty." The silence that followed was deafening. General Crawford's military bearing never wavered, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Prime Minister Sterling leaned forward, her political instincts already calculating the ramifications. Lady Thornfield looked as though she might faint. One hand pressed to her chest in a gesture of pure shock. "Your Majesty," Lord Pemberton said carefully, "such a decision would require extensive legal review, parliamentary approval, and consideration of the constitutional implications, all of which we have anticipated," Alexander said, nodding to Catherine, who opened her portfolio and began distributing copies of the documents they had prepared. "Lady Catherine has worked with me to research the legal precedents and constitutional requirements. We're not asking for permission, Lord Pemberton. We're informing you of our decision and seeking your counsel on implementation." Archbishop Hastings picked up his copy with trembling fingers. "Your Majesty, the Church's position on divorce has evolved over the centuries, but to dissolve a royal marriage by mutual consent, this is unprecedented in our modern era. Unprecedented circumstances require unprecedented solutions," Alexander replied. "I will not rule over a kingdom while living a lie. The people deserve better from their monarch, and I deserve the chance to find genuine happiness after years of performing a role that has brought neither my wife nor myself fulfillment." Prime Minister Sterling cleared her throat, her political mind already working through the crisis management that would be required. "Your Majesty, the media response will be unprecedented. The constitutional monarchists will be outraged. The Republicans will see this as validation of their position. And the public—" She paused, considering her words carefully. "The public's reaction is difficult to predict." Catherine spoke for the first time since entering the room, her voice steady and professional. "We've prepared a comprehensive communication strategy," she said, distributing another set of documents. "Complete transparency about the situation, emphasis on the mutual nature of the decision, and a focus on how this choice demonstrates the monarchy's ability to prioritize honesty and personal integrity over outdated traditions." Lady Thornfield finally found her voice. "Your Majesty, what of the succession? What of the stability of the crown? Queen Isabel was never going to provide an heir," Alexander said quietly, the admission hanging heavy in the room. "Our marriage, while cordial and respectful, lacked the intimate connection necessary for that level of commitment to each other or to the future of the dynasty." General Crawford leaned back in his chair, his strategic mind processing the situation. "And Prince Marcus? What becomes of him in this scenario?" "Marcus will renounce his claim to the throne and his royal titles," Alexander explained. "He'll retain his personal estates and wealth, and in time, when the immediate scandal subsides, he and Isabel will be free to marry if they choose. He understands the consequences of his actions and is prepared to accept them. Archbishop Hastings was reading through the legal documents with growing amazement. Your Majesty, these papers are remarkably thorough. The precedent research alone must have taken weeks. Catherine and Alexander exchanged a brief glance, and she answered, "We've been working on this since dawn, Archbishop. Sometimes clarity comes suddenly, and when it does, it's important to act decisively." Lord Pemberton looked up from his papers, his expression thoughtful rather than shocked. "Your Majesty, may I ask what has prompted this sudden clarity? Surely the Queen's indiscretion could have been handled more quietly, with less disruption to the monarchy." Alexander moved to the tall windows that looked out over the palace grounds, where gardeners were preparing the grounds for winter. In the distance, he could see the rose garden where so many important moments of his life had taken place. His proposal to Isabel, his first official portrait as king, countless diplomatic walks with foreign dignitaries. "Because I've realized that a monarchy that cannot adapt to human truth and human needs is a monarchy that has lost its relevance," he said, turning back to face the council. "For too long, we've hidden behind tradition and protocol, pretending that royal blood somehow makes us immune to the same joys and sorrows that affect all our subjects. It doesn't." Prime Minister Sterling leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. "And what you propose as the alternative, Your Majesty?" Alexander returned to his seat, but this time Catherine took the chair beside him rather than standing behind him like a secretary. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the room. "A monarchy that is both modern and timeless," Alexander said. "One that honors tradition while embracing the truth that even kings and queens are human beings with hearts that can break and heal and love again. One that shows our people that integrity and honesty are more important than maintaining comfortable illusions." Lady Thornfield was studying Catherine with new interest, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of her appearance and demeanor. "Your Majesty," she said slowly, "am I to understand that Lady Catherine's role in this situation extends beyond her professional duties?" The question that everyone had been thinking, but no one had dared voice, hung in the air like incense in a cathedral. Alexander reached over and took Catherine's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had been doing it for years. "Catherine has been my closest advisor, my most trusted friend, and my constant support for 8 years, Alexander said. "During that time, she has shown me what it means to be truly known and understood by another person. She has earned my respect, my trust, and yes, my love. When my marriage ends, I intend to court her properly, and, if she'll have me, make her my wife." The gasps around the table were audible. Catherine's cheeks flushed pink, but she held her head high, meeting each council member's gaze with quiet dignity. General Crawford was the first to speak. "Your Majesty, Lady Catherine is a commoner. The constitutional implications of a king marrying outside the nobility are manageable," Alexander interrupted firmly. "The monarch has the right to marry whom he chooses, with parliamentary consent. The people loved Catherine's grandmother, who served as a nurse during the war. Catherine herself has a distinguished education, 8 years of exemplary service to the crown, and the respect of everyone who has worked with her. She would not be the first commoner to marry into the royal family, and the precedents are positive." Archbishop Hastings was studying Catherine with new interest. "Lady Catherine, you understand the magnitude of what you would be taking on? The scrutiny, the responsibility, the loss of privacy." Catherine spoke clearly and without hesitation. "Your Grace, I've spent 8 years watching what royal life demands. I understand the sacrifices required, but I also believe that love, when it's genuine and deeply rooted, can provide the strength needed to bear those burdens. I love Alexander, not the king, but the man, and I'm prepared to support him in whatever capacity serves the realm best." Lord Pemberton set down his papers and looked directly at Alexander. "Your Majesty, This is the most significant decision regarding the monarchy since your great-grandfather's coronation. Are you absolutely certain this is the path you wish to take? Alexander squeezed Catherine's hand and met the Lord Chancellor's gaze without wavering. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The rain had stopped while they talked, and afternoon sunlight was beginning to stream through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the polished table. Outside, the palace grounds were beginning to glisten as the sun emerged from the clouds. Then, Lord Pemberton said slowly, "We have a great deal of work to do. The legal proceedings alone will take months, and the political navigation will require delicate handling. But if this is your decision, Your Majesty, then it is our duty to ensure it is implemented with all the dignity and care the monarchy deserves." Prime Minister Sterling was already making notes on her tablet. "We'll need to coordinate with the press office, prepare statements for Parliament, and brief the Commonwealth governors. This will be the biggest royal story since the truth became more important than appearances," Alexander finished. "Which is exactly the message I want to send." As the meeting continued into the late afternoon, plans were made, protocols were established, and the framework for a royal revolution was put into place. But for Alexander and Catherine, sitting side by side as partners rather than king and subject, the most important decision had already been made. They were choosing love, honesty, and the hope that even the oldest institutions could learn to embrace change when it came from a place of integrity rather than scandal. The monarchy would survive because sometimes the strongest traditions are those flexible enough to bend without breaking. Part for the great ballroom of Aldoria Palace had witnessed countless historic moments over the centuries: coronations, state banquets, diplomatic triumphs, and royal celebrations that had shaped the destiny of nations. But never had it hosted an event quite like the one unfolding on this crisp December evening, exactly 2 months after King Alexander's shocking announcement had sent shockwaves through the monarchy and around the world. Tonight, the ballroom had been transformed into something between a royal reception and an intimate celebration, its crystal chandeliers casting warm light over arrangements of winter white roses and evergreen branches. The guest list was carefully curated. Members of Parliament who had supported the king's decision, foreign ambassadors who had navigated the diplomatic complexities with grace, close family friends, palace staff who had served with distinction, and representatives from the charitable organizations that would benefit from this new chapter in royal history. King Alexander stood at the entrance to the ballroom, resplendent in his formal evening wear, greeting guests with the easy confidence that had marked his transformation over the past 2 months. The strain that had shadowed his features for years had lifted, replaced by a vitality and genuine warmth that had not gone unnoticed by the press or the public. Tonight marked not just a personal milestone, but a constitutional precedent that would be studied and debated for generations to come. The past 2 months have been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, parliamentary debates, and public relations campaigns unlike anything the monarchy had ever undertaken. The initial shock of Alexander's announcement had given way to surprising public support as the full story emerged. The revelation that both the king and queen had been trapped in a loveless marriage of duty had resonated with a public increasingly hungry for authenticity from their leaders. Queen Isabel, now styled as the Duchess of Montclair following her divorce settlement, had conducted herself with remarkable dignity throughout the process. Her exclusive interview with the BBC, where she spoke candidly about the pressures of royal marriage and her genuine affection for both Alexander and Marcus, had shifted public perception in their favor. Rather than being seen as a scandalous adulteress, she had emerged as a sympathetic figure trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Prince Marcus, now simply Lord Marcus Whitmore, had also handled his disgrace with unexpected grace. His public statement accepting full responsibility for the affair and renouncing his titles had been viewed as honorable by many. His subsequent retreat to his country estate with Isabel, where they were reportedly planning a quiet wedding in the spring, had allowed the immediate scandal to fade into a more romantic narrative of true love overcoming impossible obstacles. But Tonight belonged to Alexander and Catherine, whose engagement had been announced just 1 week ago to overwhelming public approval. The photographs of Alexander's proposal, taken in the same rose garden where he had proposed to Isabel 15 years earlier, had captured the world's imagination. But, unlike his first proposal, which had been stiff and formal, this one radiated genuine joy and spontaneous emotion. Catherine entered the ballroom on the arm of her father, retired Colonel James Ashford, a distinguished military man whose pride in his daughter was evident to everyone present. She wore a stunning midnight blue silk gown that had been designed by the same couturier who had created her grandmother's nursing uniform during the war, a deliberate nod to her family's history of service that had been appreciated by both the press and the public. The gown itself was a masterpiece of understated elegance, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that moved like liquid as she walked. Her auburn hair was styled in an elaborate updo that showcased the diamond and sapphire tiara that had been Alexander's engagement gift. Not a traditional royal heirloom, but a new piece commissioned specifically for her, symbolizing the new traditions they were creating together. As Catherine approached, Alexander felt the same surge of certainty that had guided him through every difficult decision of the past 2 months. She moved with the same grace and dignity that had first caught his attention years ago, but now there was something more, a confidence and radiance that came from finally stepping out of the shadows and into her rightful place. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, His Majesty King Alexander Edmund Whitmore III, and his fiancée, Lady Catherine Elizabeth Ashford. The applause that followed was warm and genuine, a marked contrast to the polite but restrained reception that had often greeted royal events in the past. This felt more like a family celebration than a state function, which was exactly what Alexander had hoped to achieve. Lord Chancellor Pemberton approached the couple, carrying a leather-bound document that represented months of legal work and constitutional innovation. "Your Majesty, Lady Catherine," he said with a bow, "I am pleased to present the final decree of divorce, signed by all relevant parties and approved by Parliament. Your Majesty is now free to remarry according to the laws of the realm." Alexander accepted the document with a nod of thanks, then surprised everyone by immediately handing it to Catherine. "The past is officially closed," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Tonight, we look only toward the future." Catherine smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. "A future we'll build together," she replied, her voice carrying the confidence that had made her such an effective advisor and would serve her well as queen. Prime Minister Sterling approached with a small group of parliamentary leaders, her expression reflecting the political satisfaction of having navigated the crisis successfully. "Your Majesty, I wanted to express the government's continued support for your decisions and our anticipation of working with you and Lady Catherine in the years to come." "Prime Minister," Alexander replied, "I want to thank you for your steady leadership during what could have been a constitutional crisis. Your support made all the difference in achieving a smooth transition." As the evening progressed, guests mingled freely throughout the ballroom, the atmosphere more relaxed and convivial than typical royal receptions. Alexander and Catherine moved through the crowd together, no longer maintaining the formal distance that protocol had once required. They spoke with foreign ambassadors about the international implications of the monarchy's modernization, with charitable organization leaders about expanded philanthropic initiatives, and with palace staff about the changes that would come with a new queen. Archbishop Hastings, who had initially been skeptical of Alexander's decision, approached the couple near the magnificent Christmas tree that dominated one corner of the ballroom. "Your Majesty, Lady Catherine," he said with genuine warmth, "I must admit that my initial concerns have been proven unfounded. The grace and dignity with which you've both handled the situation has strengthened rather than weakened the monarchy." Catherine curtsied slightly, a gesture that was becoming second nature to her. "Your Grace, we both understood that extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary measures. We're grateful for your eventual support and guidance. The wedding ceremony promises to be quite special, the Archbishop continued. A blend of traditional elements with some innovations that reflect your unique journey together. The arrangements for Westminster Abbey are proceeding beautifully. Alexander nodded, his hand finding Catherine's in a gesture that was becoming natural to them both. We want the ceremony to honor the past while embracing the future. Traditional enough to respect the institution, but personal enough to reflect who we really are. As the evening wore on, guests were treated to a surprise that perfectly encapsulated the changes taking place within the monarchy. Alexander and Catherine took to the dance floor for what was announced as their first official dance as an engaged couple. But instead of the formal waltz that tradition would have dictated, they chose a piece of contemporary classical music that built from intimate beginning to soaring crescendo. They moved together with the kind of natural harmony that comes from years of understanding each other's rhythms and preferences. Catherine's gown swirled around them as Alexander spun her, both of them laughing with pure joy in a way that royal couples had rarely been photographed before. The assembled guests burst into spontaneous applause, and camera flashes captured what would become one of the most iconic images of their relationship. Later in the evening, Alexander and Catherine stepped out onto one of the ballroom's terraces, seeking a moment of relative privacy amid the celebration. The December air was crisp and clear, and the palace gardens stretched out before them under a canopy of stars. "Do you ever miss the simplicity of your old life?" Alexander asked, pulling Catherine closer as they looked out over the grounds where they had walked together so many times as king and secretary. Catherine considered the question seriously before answering. "I miss the anonymity sometimes," she admitted. "Being able to walk through London without security, choosing my own schedule, making decisions that only affected myself. But I don't miss the sense of incompleteness I always felt, as if I were living only half a life." Alexander understood exactly what she meant. "I've been thinking about legacy lately," he said. "My father and grandfather are remembered for their dedication to duty and tradition. I want to be remembered for showing that duty and happiness don't have to be mutually exclusive." "You will be," Catherine assured him. "The letters we've received from the public, the support from Parliament, the way other constitutional monarchies are already studying our approach. You've changed more than just your own life, Alexander. You've changed what it means to be royal in the modern world." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the lights of London twinkling in the distance. Inside, the party continued with the kind of warmth and genuine celebration that had been missing from royal events for far too long. "No regrets?" Alexander asked, the question encompassing everything they had risked and gained. Catherine turned in his arms to face him fully, her green eyes bright with certainty. "Only that we waited so long to be honest about what we meant to each other." Alexander leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that was both tender and passionate, private, and yet symbolically significant. They were no longer hiding their feelings behind professional protocols or social expectations. They were simply two people who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances and had the courage to choose that love over every obstacle placed in their path. As they broke apart, Catherine smiled with the kind of radiance that made Alexander understand why the public had embraced her so completely. "Besides," she added with a touch of her old humor, "I've rather gotten used to being able to rearrange your schedule without asking permission." Alexander laughed, the sound carrying across the terrace and through the open doors to the ballroom beyond, where their guests were celebrating not just an engagement, but the transformation of one of the world's oldest institutions into something more human, more authentic, and more hopeful than it had been in centuries. The clock in the palace tower chimed midnight, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. In 6 months, Alexander and Catherine would stand together in Westminster Abbey as the first king in generations to marry for love rather than duty. They would face challenges and criticisms, certainly, but they would face them together with the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. As they returned to their guests, Alexander reflected on how much had changed since that gray October morning when photographs of betrayal had shattered his comfortable illusions. He had lost a marriage based on obligation and gained a partnership based on truth. The monarchy had survived its greatest test in decades and emerged stronger, more relevant, and more human. The revolution had been quiet but complete, proving that sometimes the most profound changes come not from dramatic gestures, but from the simple courage to choose love over convenience, truth over comfort, and authentic connection over hollow tradition. In the ballroom, the celebration continued well into the night, marking not just the end of one royal story, but the beginning of an entirely new chapter in the long history of the crown. And so King Alexander's shocking turn became not a scandal that weakened the monarchy, but a transformation that proved even the most ancient institutions could adapt, evolve, and emerge stronger when guided by courage, honesty, and the revolutionary power of genuine love. Behind the gilded walls of Valdoria Palace, where centuries of tradition dictate every breath and whisper, a storm was brewing that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. King Alexander Edmund Whitmore III had ruled with unwavering dignity for 15 years, but on this gray October morning, as he stared at the damning photographs scattered across his mahogany desk, everything he believed about love, loyalty, and duty was about to change forever. The images showed his wife of 12 years, Queen Isabel, in an intimate embrace with his own brother, Prince Marcus. But it wasn't just betrayal that would rock the kingdom. It was the choice Alexander was about to make that would rewrite royal history and capture the heart of a woman who had been silently suffering in the shadows of the palace corridors.